Chelsea beat Leicester 1-0, a single goal from Marc Cucurella from outside the box, giving Chelsea and Enzo Maresca a vital win in the race for Champions League qualification. This is my review. I'm Daniel Childs. Hope you're doing really, really well. Recording this on the day of Chelsea's 120th birthday. So happy birthday to Chelsea FC. The undying love, the thing that gives us pleasure, stress, frustration, passion, family, music, icons, culture, whatever you think about Chelsea, whatever means most to you. Obviously, it's a very special anniversary and actually excited to see what the club will do to kind of celebrate it, because I don't think it's just today, obviously posting stuff about it, but also yesterday seeing the likes of Dennis Wise and Jimmy Ford Hasselbank, Kerry Dixon on the pitch before the game. Also, I believe they're doing other things, so excited to see that. But happy birthday to Chelsea, and nice to speak about it right after a win. A win that is quite strange to cover because the mood post it by many people has been, diverse, really. You get some people who are just looking solely at the scoreline and say a win is a win at this point of the season. Once you get into March, April or May, you just got to be putting points on the board, and that's exactly what Chelsea need to do. I agree with that. There's some people who think the performance was actually not that bad, given Chelsea have struggled against teams that come to the bridge, don't offer a lot in attack. I guess there's some validity to that. And there are some people who are deeply frustrated and disconnected with the style of play. Of course, are always going to be happy when Chelsea win, but don't quite appreciate what they're watching, are not overly convinced by it, and especially with what Enzo Maresca went out and said post-game, are probably going to be infuriated with it. So we'll try and cover all of that in today's show. It's not just that, it's also Cole Palmer. I think we've got to spend some time speaking about Cole Palmer because that his struggles, his lack of confidence exemplified by that penalty miss, his first penalty miss in a Chelsea shirt yesterday. What's going on with him? Are we reading too much into it? I'll give you my thoughts. Apologies for a lack of content recently. Been struggling with illness and some other stuff. So I'm happy to be back on the show and hopefully recording shows about Chelsea winning, because it's not just obviously yesterday we got the game against Copenhagen that Chelsea have to put away to progress in that competition, and in a massive game next weekend at Arsenal. It really is one of the biggest games, I think, of Maresca's time so far, given Chelsea. And we'll obviously, that would be more of a focus later in the week. But, I do think it is obviously relevant in terms of Chelsea's progression as a team and have they made any progress. So I think the thing to start on here is that obviously Chelsea were given a major chance here because Nottingham Forest beat Man City. Sure, a draw probably would have been the best result. You have two teams near you taking points of each other. But if there was one winner, I think we wanted Nottingham Forest rather than Man City. So it meant that if Chelsea beat Leicester at home, they would go 2 points clear of Man City, which is what they did. The starting lineup was mixed, I think, in terms of my reaction to it. Robert Sanchez back in goal. I don't get it. We've been through it so many times before, and I think we've well passed the stage now with Robert Sanchez where, and I guess you could say the same about Philip Jorgensen, right? And that's kind of the no-win situation Enzo Maresca's in, that when you've got flawed players and you persist with them, how much then is it the players' fault themselves if you keep choosing them? Jorgensen, I think the thing of Jorgensen, yes, he's made some errors, but he's not been given the length of patience that Robert Sanchez was in the first part of the season. So you can kind of turn around and go, well, Sanchez is a better keeper than Philip Jorgensen, but I don't think we've had equal time to judge that if we're just being consistent and just, accurate about their actual game time. But, the goalkeeping situation is there are things in this current Chelsea team that I think are going to remain a problem for the rest of the season. I just think you have to accept them. I'm not saying I accept ever that Robert Sanchez is first choice, but it's like there's nothing that's going to radically change between now and the end of the year. Robert Sanchez is a flawed keeper. Philip Jorgensen is, I think, a flawed keeper. And you kind of have to just work around it because that's the situation Chelsea have put themselves in. But there was obviously one shaky moment in the first half. Sanchez was never really tested that much against a very, very poor and unambitious opponent in Leicester. We will see what Maresca does, not only on Thursday, but I think more importantly at the Emirates, whether he goes with Sanchez again. We'll see about that. But obviously the first time for many months seeing Wesley Fofana return to the first team, playing kind of a right back / right centre back role. I thought, given this is a guy who hasn't played a lot of football recently, has been on the sidelines, I thought we had a really commanding, just energetic performance. I think it was just good, probably mentally, for him to get out on the pitch and have a positive day. Tosin, Colwell, Cucurella, Enzo, Caicedo, Palmer, Sancho, and Nkunku, Neto. I would have preferred to have seen maybe Tyreek George. I think Tyreek George has impressed in his recent cameos. I didn't expect Maresca to start. I expected that Pedro Neto would return as our focal point. You can't really have many complaints or kind of be flabbergasted with the rest of the team. I think the one thing I've consistently talked about, or just I felt looking at that team again, given the injury problems we've got, is, Reece James obviously was out of this game through illness. Malo Gusto picked up a knock on Thursday against Copenhagen. The treatment of Josh Achimpong is just very, very weird to me. I don't think Maresca has handled that situation very well. He did come on late in this game, and I think both him and George gave Chelsea an impetus and an aggression and a bit of intensity when they needed it to just get over the line. But given you have no left-back cover, which is you're basically relying so much, not only in terms of just like depth, but like goal scoring at the moment on Marc Cucurella. You hope he doesn't get injured. James, we know his struggles off the pitch in terms of, on and off the pitch in terms of fitness, and then Malo Gusto going down with an injury. I just think it's self-defeating you not using Josh Achimpong, because it's unclear how long Fofana can stay fit for. So I just don't understand that. I really don't, especially as we enter the final running of this season, when it's going to be a lot more, especially if Chelsea progress on Thursday, it's going to be back and forth between Thursday and the weekend, and those games are going to ramp up in significance every single week. But VAR nonsense is kind of one of the things I've written down here. It was a really terrible officiating performance. Chelsea should have had a penalty very early on. They could have had multiple penalties in this game. They eventually did get one through Jadon Sancho being taken out and tripped in the box. That was obvious. But this was a terrible officiating performance. I mean, which means it's kind of standard for Premier League. I mean, it really is. Anthony Taylor, who wasn't at the Bridge but was at the Man United Arsenal game, I saw someone who's watching that game says it's like he flips a coin with every decision, and it felt like with this game too. It was just so lazy, so pathetic at times, how many times you just see officials in the Premier League be conned by very obvious things, not give something, not give the other, VAR not intervening when it should. Again, very old things we've talked about with the Premier League officiating, which is why I don't try and make it a central point of all my analysis, because you kind of are just beating a dead horse at this point, because it just is the same problem. But obviously it's infuriating, especially if it's costing you, and you see teams elsewhere in the league get penalties that you don't get, and it's always going to be infuriating, and that's unfortunately the state of Premier League officiating. We did get a penalty though. Cole Palmer steps up. Cole Palmer, after a bit of a wait, misses it, and it shows his humanity, right? Like, he is human. He misses a penalty, and it kind of completely sucked, I think, the energy out of the crowd, because people view Palmer as this metronomic kind of inspirational figure that has lifted Chelsea in really low moments, and it feels like over the past few months Palmer has been dragged down into that mediocrity. He hasn't risen above it, and that's quite staggering. And there's a lot to say about Cole Palmer. I'll move on to the rest of the game. We'll get back to Palmer, because I do think there's a bit to talk about with him. I think part of it can be attributed maybe to the overall problems at Chelsea currently, but then there is another part to it that maybe is relevant to talk about here. I want to hear your thoughts on Cole Palmer. But obviously the first half was not good. It was not entertaining. It was not engaging. Chelsea kind of did what they did against Copenhagen. It's very textbook positional play, slow, turgid football. That is what Enzo Maresca's Chelsea is now. And you can bemoan certain things, what opposition do, what they don't do. You can bemoan officiating. You can bemoan some of the injuries we have. But to me, it's kind of... I've watched Chelsea long enough now under Enzo Maresca to make a judgment. This is his style of play. This is what he wants to implement. And publicly, he talks about how much he enjoys this style of football and how much he's proud of this style of football. So you have to take him by his word. This is his Chelsea. This is the style of play he's trying to implement. And given the way people defend him, I have to then judge it on, well, if this is what we're meant to be doing, if this is what was, drawn up, as Todd Bowley said last year about Pochettino, if this was drawn up, which I think it is, to be this positional style of play, and then the CFC Central pointed out the boos at half-time, 0.18 XG from open play in 45 minutes against a side that have conceded 61 goals this season, 62 now after yesterday. 0.9 against Copenhagen in the first half, and then individual moments very much bailed us out in the second half. An individual moment of class, also bailed us out of this game too. And I think CFC Central makes a great point, is that, you look at the ingenious creator to hit half-space crosses against low blocks to Cucurella, who's only got like a 30% error win rate. Neto 20.6, Sancho 22%, far too comfortable for every side that comes up against us. And, people were talking about the style of play, aesthetic, not aesthetic. I do think that there are things about Maresca's approach, and I do think there are things about this style of play that just doesn't jive with Chelsea fans. I just don't think it does. I don't think people feel engaged when they watch, especially against very bad opposition, who you could tell during periods of that game, despite their defensive setup, still there were massive gaps in between their defence and midfield that have been present, that Leicester fans have talked about tactically, how all over the place they are, how Vanessa Roy has tried to enact this progressive game that just isn't working for them. They've had a very terrible season, and the fact that Chelsea weren't exploiting that. There are many times when Chelsea look like they could hit on transition but decide to play a safer pass. Enzo Fernandez at times playing a very safe, restricted role, and it's at moments like that where you have to look at the head coach and ask, are you getting the best out of your team? Are players being put in the suitable roles for their talent and what they could do to better implement a more effective style? And I think in almost every metric since December, Chelsea have regressed. I don't know how you counter argue that, really. You can look at Southampton and Leicester and you can talk that we did win 2 games, but those are games you're supposed to win. And I think it's undeniable when you watch Chelsea currently. It's just so passive. It's just so more pedestrian. It's just so more predictable. And that's not what I was crediting Maresca and Chelsea for earlier in the year. It's just chalk and cheese. I don't know how people can look at Chelsea now and look at Chelsea in September and October and November and tell me that's the same team. Tell me that we are still playing at the same level. We simply aren't. And yes, Maresca has had to deal with injuries, but every coach has to deal with injuries. Every coach has to deal with dips in form. What Maresca is dealing with now is not wholly unique to previous Chelsea head coaches. So I don't think it's a good enough excuse to turn around and, talk about how he's being let down in certain capacity. I think as a coach, his style of play, I just don't think is going to get Chelsea significantly forward. That's my fear currently, because at the end of the day, this game was saved by Marc Cucurella venturing into a good area and brilliantly cutting a shot across Hermansen into the bottom corner. It's a brilliant moment of individual brilliance. It felt very similar to Reece James' goal in the second half. It's notable that nearly everything that happens in this Chelsea team, when this was happening pre-Christmas, very rarely seems to be based on what I think Maresca wants the team to be or what it's designed to be. It does feel like individual moments are very much key to making things work at the moment. If they keep on working, they keep on working. As we say, if Chelsea keep winning games and just get points on the board and we get Champions League football, Maresca could turn around, and whatever his intention with the team is, he's got us Champions League football. The season has been a success based on what was the main objective at the start of the year. My fear is that Arsenal are not 19th place. Arsenal are not 20th place. Arsenal are not going to give you the same leeway. They're not going to sit back for 90 minutes and offer absolutely nothing in attack, despite their attacking issues. Chelsea are going to have to face some much better opposition in the upcoming weeks, and I fear when that better opposition presents itself, your errors are going to be more pounced upon. Our lack of creativity is going to be impacted more and is going to be more costly. Those are those fears. I don't think that, if Chelsea would have gone out yesterday and won 4-0 and it would have been more like that Southampton game, you could have looked at both games, and you can caveat it all you want about poor opposition, but you can at least look at both games and gone, attack-wise, things are clicking a little bit more again. And at least the attacking players are feeling more confident walking into a key run of the season. I think yesterday and Copenhagen are 2 games that, to me, still feel like Chelsea are stuck in this rut, and that's the interesting thing tactically for me as Maresca walks into a period of the year when really that is going to be tested to the limit. If Chelsea don't have the answers, I think they will be exposed. They are limited by the fact that they don't have a natural centre forward at the moment. That's not on Maresca. That is obviously on the sporting directors for simply failing to elevate this squad to a competent level. We haven't built a competent squad. As I say, that's not Maresca's fault. I think that is more on the sporting directors. But again, I think there needs to be a balance between the people above Enzo Maresca that rightly hold a lot of criticism, and also Enzo Maresca for himself. For a team that I find just ways the team is orchestrated and the way the team plays just weird. I think, many things were working pre-Christmas and many things seem to be getting the best out of the skill set of players. It seems to have gone in the reverse. Someone pointed out it seems now, like, it might have been Nick Villaney from London is Blue Pod was saying that, like, it seems like we're now, our attacking kind of method is getting Marc Cucurella into better positions. And all right, it works yesterday. He turns a little bit into Marcus Alonso this season and is scoring a lot of goals based on, predictions for him scoring a lot of goals. But is that really what we want? Is that really what we crave from this Chelsea team? So Chelsea get the job done. I was happy to see Josh come on. I think Tyreek George, I've got to give credit to Neto. He absolutely worked his socks off and he literally collapsed to the ground. He was in the walls. He had a headband on that he had to put on several times during the game. The crowd appreciated that. The crowd appreciated Marc Cucurella. I mean, is Marc Cucurella your player of the season? I think it's a two-way battle between him and Caicedo because they do so much legwork and so much dirty work for this team, and they have done for a majority of the year, and they've been consistent. That's the way I think you're supposed to judge player of the season. It's supposed to be a not a judge of a player plays well for 2 weeks and puts up some nice comps that you can replay on X. It's about a player that I think from August to May, you can actually look at and go, this guy has been at least a 7 or 8 or more out of 10 most weeks. He has been there integral to Chelsea as a functioning team. And I think if Chelsea do get over the line, I will be looking at Moises Caicedo eating up ground, making key interceptions, helping out others. I think Cucurella too. They're not the most flamboyant players. They're not the players that, in the case of Cucurella, it was yesterday, but, they're not the most special attacking players, but they are, I think, integral players to the way Chelsea are able to battle in games at the moment, which I think is kind of how they're getting over the line. So I think that's undeniable. And I think Cucurella, obviously, you think of the transformation of Cucurella. Almost 12 months ago, he started to turn it around with Pochettino. It's been remarkable. I mean, it's one of those incredible comeback stories that I don't think many people saw. And it was great to see that connection between him and the Shed later on in the game when he, put a tackle in. I think it was, he won a throw in and, he pumped towards the crowd. And that was great to see. And it's great to see that connection has been built over the period of time because connection between Chelsea, the players and the coach, we'll get to this with Maresca's comments post-game, has been an issue. But I think it's clearly there with Cucurella and he deserves his flowers because I think this season he has been one of Chelsea's best performers. I think that's just undeniable. You could talk about him versus players of a different era, but I think it's fair to judge him based on the players he's playing with currently. And I think he is one of the best players in the current team based on consistent level of performance. And we obviously saw that was key yesterday. 2 more things to speak about before we wrap up. Cole Palmer, there's so much to say about this because I wrote a piece for Substack right after the Euros final when obviously Palmer had scored and he was off the back of a brilliant debut season for Chelsea. And there were fears that he would regress under Enzo Maresca's positional style of play. Up until about January, it was very hard to argue that was the case. It just was. In many ways, you could look at Palmer. Either it didn't affect him, he was going to another level. He's so good that, it doesn't matter really what you're trying to do with him. He's just going to elevate the team and players around him because he is that good, because that's the way he's been. Since January, that hasn't been the case. Now, it's not just fair to say the system's making him a worse player because in that period, he has had one-on-ones. He has had penalties. He has had moments where he could have scored goals, where you think a player 12 months ago is burying that opportunity. There was a moment in the second half when Hermansen was out of his goal. Palmer yesterday waits. I think eventually loses the ball or lays it off to someone else and a chance breaks down. 12 months ago, Palmer is instantly chipping that towards the goal and is probably scoring. It's the Jordan Pickford goal against Everton, right? Palmer's not doing that right now. The invention has gone. You sense he's not the most... Palmer is kind of made a joke. He's not the most extroverted personality, so it's hard to tell if he's really struggling because even when he's playing well, he kind of has the same demeanour. But quite clearly, I watched him post that penalty miss, and he didn't take the corner. Enzo Fernandez took the corner, and he was just leaning over, hands on his knees, kind of looking down at the ground, really frustrated. And at the moment, it feels like he's second guessing himself. I'm not Maresca's biggest fan. I don't think his style of play is great. And I think it's very convenient for me to then link this style of play in hurting Cole Palmer. I do think there probably is some legitimacy to that generally because I don't think this risk free, robotic style of play is great. But I also think we have to factor in Palmer is still a ridiculously young player who has walked into a club with a lot of problems, and for a long period of time in his Chelsea career so far, he has been an inspiration. He has been a hero for many Chelsea fans. He has done things that he's broken records and scored a level of goal that none of us could have anticipated when he signed for the club. Is it just a case of a young player hitting a snag in confidence and form, and he needs to get through this? The issue he's got, and I said this on X yesterday, and I'll stand by this, and it gets back to the people above Maresca and just the culture at the club at the moment that's a problem. You think about the 120th anniversary, you'll go back to dressing rooms with better leaders, better experience, better veterans. And I spoke about this last week, that, when Palmer's failing at the moment, it's becoming more and more evident because there's very little around him that can take up the slack, basically. There's not someone maybe to put their arm around him and guide him or take the weight off him, because you've got a senior striker who's going to score those goals when Palmer is maybe in a little bit of a lull in the season, or an experienced veteran winger who can take up the workload. Someone, people can demean him, but someone like Willian, right, was never Eden Hazard, but he was someone who could, in periods of the season, have bursts of form that were very key when a player like Eden maybe dipped a little. There's not enough of those players in the first team currently who are going to step up to the plate. So I think it's more damaging. It's a bit like the Esteval conversation I was having on my more recent pod. I think it was the last pod I did, of that culture around him. So I think it's a multitude of factors. If you're more negative about Enzo Maresca, I think you could link it to a style of play. I don't think that's wholly fair when you look at the fact that undeniably Palmer in this run has been able to score goals, and I think he should have buried chances and he hasn't been able to bury chances. And then you probably factor in, is this a guy that's been drained by also the burden on his shoulders of leading this team, of being so young, of being projected as this world superstar already? And maybe it is, playing on him a little bit. I hope it isn't. I hope it is just a bad run of form, and he will come through this and be better than ever, because, I think that's just natural for 99.9% of young players, especially players of his talent. I think talent will just, he will work through this. I just firmly believe it. But it is concerning because he is the golden boy. He is the star boy. He is the one that, for many of us, when we look at the team, you're kind of expecting him to raise the level of the team. And when he isn't, who else is there? If you're not getting a left back surging forward and smashing a ball into the bottom corner, if you don't have that, where else is the ingenuity and invention and creativity coming from? That is in itself a major flaw of this current Chelsea team, which is undeniable. So hopefully he can click into gear, because Chelsea kind of need him to click into gear, because I just can't see Chelsea getting now to the end of the season with Palmer in his current state and us relying on your left backs, Enzo Fernandez, or just, fluky goals going in every now and then that are going to get us through a game. Palmer needs to find it. It's whether you think the coaching and the style of play is meaning he regresses as a player, which I don't think is completely unfair, because who has severely progressed under Enzo Maresca's coaching the longer the season has gone on? I mean, who seriously do you think has transformed as a player? I think the best argument I've seen is a player like Enzo Fernandez, because Enzo Fernandez has been a lot better this season. He's had spells of form that are a lot better. But then I even look at Enzo, the way he's being asked to play. Maresca said this post-game that, when Fernandez, who is talked about as this great potential world star progressive midfielder, passing the ball backwards consistently, and that's frustrating people. Is that going to help him in the long term? I don't think so. The final thing is obviously what Maresca said post-game. This is what he had to say. So let's go through his quote verbatim, and then we'll go through and react to it. He said, "The people, they have to understand that this is our way, our style, and this is the way we're going to play. When a team creates the amount of chances we create today, you have to be happy. It's not easy." I think there's a bit of a rebuttal there in terms of chances. Like, again, you look at the XG from that first half. The second half wasn't exactly much better in terms of great opportunities. Chelsea is not exactly were banging down the door. We were creating pressure because I think Leicester naturally sat back and Chelsea had a lot of territory. But how many times did Chelsea have gilt-edged opportunities other than the penalty in the first half, which of course is always going to boost your XG overall, that we missed? I can't think of many. I think it was kind of very similar, repetitive rotations, doing the same sort of thing. playing it out to the fullbacks, into central midfield, back to the fullbacks, back to the centre-back, back to the goalkeeper, looking for width. A cross goes into the box. We don't have the aerial height to win it. And then you're looking for those knockdowns and those little 1-2s round the box that hopefully can open something up for you. It's not like Chelsea completely demolished Leicester yesterday and the score flattered Leicester. I think the way you could say the score flattered Leicester is that we didn't get another penalty and Palmer didn't take his penalty. He didn't score his penalty. I just don't. It's not Southampton. If the Southampton game, we did have we could have scored more than 4 actually. So I think that would be a fair analogy for that game. I don't think it is for this one. And taking aim at the support, I just think is an own goal from Maresca. I just don't get it. Things have been tough at Chelsea for a while. You've just won a game against 19th place. Everyone goes home happy. Let's move forward to next week. Let's hopefully beat Copenhagen, progress in that competition closer to the final, closer to the first trophy on the Clear Lake, which is imperative. Then you move to a massive game next week against Arsenal when all eyes are going to be on it. This is not the time to turn around and start wagging your finger at supporters. The support yesterday, because I hear a lot about this from people who, frankly, it makes me laugh, like people especially who weren't at the game and rarely ever go to Stamford Bridge. If you're going to talk about atmosphere, and I'm not saying you can't gain anything from watching it on TV, but I can tell you from someone who's gone to Stamford Bridge all of their life, yesterday's atmosphere is not even in like the top 10 of the worst I've experienced in, the last like 3 or 4 years. It was a bog standard game against a poor opposition where there were frustrations with the referee, there were frustrations with our slow style of play. There was obviously shock when Palmer missed a penalty, but when we scored, there was a loud cheer. When the full-time whistle went, there was a loud cheer. There was urging players on. There was clapping of the players when they closed opposition down, like Pedro Neto got a lot of praise as the game, even a chant late on because he was closing down and hounding Leicester players to try and win the ball back and stop them building up. There was nothing out of the ordinary about Chelsea yesterday. And it's that kind of stuff that just, I think, grates so many people and doesn't make Maresca a more likeable figure. He has done very little to grow a connection with Chelsea supporters. This is something me and Joe Tweed talked about. I've talked about it consistently. I don't think Clear Lake have understood the importance of when you bring in a head coach. They've got to be a great communicator. That's just the nature of being a coach of a top club. I think you have to be an excellent communicator. Just the nature of the game. And also someone who I think emotionally connects with supporters. I don't think Maresca has done either of those things. And people aren't stupid. When they sit at home and they watch us either play Copenhagen, they play Leicester, seen our performances over recent months, which haven't been great. And then they're told that really they're not intelligent enough to understand our style of play and they just need to shut up and deal with it. PR-wise, it's just a nightmare. Like you are going to get resistance from fans, especially if your results are not significant. And they haven't been from Enzo Maresca. Like beating 19th and 20th place at home is, positive. Winning games is positive, but it's not something where you suddenly are at a Jose Mourinho level of trust where you can turn around and start wagging your finger at supporters. When Mourinho did that, he was in the midst of another title charge where Chelsea would go on to win the Premier League. He had already been in charge of Chelsea's, in my opinion, greatest ever team, the 04-05 team. He'd won the title the next season. He had already been deemed Chelsea's greatest ever coach, greatest ever manager, whatever phrase you want to use at that point. He had gained so much trust that when that moment happened, I think post QPR in 2014, you can find a video on this channel speaking about it. We talked about the atmosphere. The atmosphere at big grounds at Chelsea is a broader conversation. I think it's just a distraction. I don't think it's a relevant point when we talk about what the issues on the pitch and off the pitch currently are about Chelsea. And I just don't understand what he thinks he's going to gain out of it. I think the way he gains trust and support is doing what he did in the first period of the season when Chelsea were winning more consistently. The atmosphere wasn't a problem back then. Why is it a problem now? What's radically changed between then and now? Obviously, the form is a lot better. The performance is a lot better. The style of football back then was a lot more engaging for fans. So clearly, when you're being successful, when you are winning games, the fans are going to connect to you with a style of play that speaks to them. And even in this game, the fans weren't exactly revolting against you. They were trying to drag the players through that tense at times. 96 minutes. I just don't get what Maresca's playing at, and I think he's asking for trouble. I think it's just a very Clear Lake thing of asking for overwhelming credit for very little, and unfortunately Maresca is not going to ingratiate himself to supporters like that anytime soon, because performances and form has been terrible for some time. And really now it's about put up or shut up time really for the season. Chelsea have to get those results. The fans are always going to be happy when the team wins. And I think it's a distraction. I don't think it's a good strategy from Enzo Maresca. So, maybe you disagree with me, but I'd sort of sit here and go, yes, atmosphere at top clubs and English football at like the elite is a problem across the Premier League. There are specific things about Chelsea that make it probably not as good as other clubs, but I think it is a broader problem in the Premier League. We can talk about that in a separate show, but I don't think it's going to give him much support when he really needs it at a key point in the season. I think the way he's acted in press conferences has been at times farcical. The way he's gone back and forth over what the ambitions are. People don't trust what's coming out of the club. They don't trust what comes out of the mouth of Enzo Maresca. And I don't think one of the big things that it was Peter Kenyon recently on the podcast, who of course was once part of one of Chelsea's most successful eras. And I think one of the things he said that was so key was that you need fans with you. They are key to your success. Absolutely, that's undeniable. A team and a club has to be united for that to work, and your home support is a massive part of that. But one of the key things he said, you need to bring people with you. And I just don't think Chelsea internally, and with what I hear from Enzo Maresca, understand or appreciate that. I get a sneering, condescending tone for a style of play that is kind of reheated pep ball that isn't that great, isn't that engaging to watch. I'm not watching a great team at the moment, and I hope they get Champions League football, but there are major problems in terms of our squad building and players being put in specific roles and player regression. And to try and be insulted in a way to be told that I'm just too dumb to understand what I'm watching, you are going to get the response I think you deserve. And to put a wrestling reference, which I know some people love, you'll get the Cody Rhodes response to The Rock at Elimination Chamber eventually, especially if you're not winning games, which I think is quite frankly deserved. So there we go. Those are my thoughts. I think it's obviously it's an important win, 2 points clear of Man City. I think psychologically that Arsenal game is huge. I do still think daily pointing this out that if you tally up all of Chelsea's remaining games, if we win I think all of our remaining home games, we've got basically a wide margin for error away from home. I still just think with the nature of the Premier League and the nature of the Chelsea side, I think Chelsea are going to be put in a position where they're going to have to beat someone good, and I just think they need to beat someone good, because then people who defend Enzo Maresca in this project can turn around and go, well look, we have actually beaten a top tier team. I think you need to do that. I think you need to do that to gain credibility. So it's been a very long time, and if we could win there next weekend, that would be a huge win. It would probably be the biggest Premier League win under Clear Lake so far. That's undeniable. That's how big of an opportunity next weekend is. I think you need to do that, because I think psychologically it would give everyone in the club such a huge boost. So that's what I look at with these big games. I always look at them as opportunities. And unfortunately, we haven't been able to take them for a very long time now. We haven't beat anyone really, really good for a long period of time. And as I say, Arsenal are not amazing. They're well out of the title race, and they've got obviously problems in terms of attack, in terms of their squad depth. But it's still going to be a very different game than it has been recently to Copenhagen and Leicester and Southampton. You are going to have to elevate your game to another level to win at the Emirates. So we'll see. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Please rate and review the podcast if you do enjoy it, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.